Polycultures and guilds. Here's another episode. This one we're going to break down a hybrid chestnut guild. The chestnut is the keystone species, and there's a whole bunch of other players mixed in here supporting the chestnut and having their own livelihood met as well. So let's get into it. So here we are looking at it from the west. In other words, that way is due south. And this chestnut was planted in, I believe it was the year 2010. So now it's getting on to being a much more mature tree at 7 years. It started making nuts last year. This year it should put on a very strong crop. There are a lot of catkins, I believe that's a name for them, all on the tips of the leaves. And it's got a partner just over there. So if you plant a chestnut, you generally want a few, and ideally they're close together enough that they can wind pollinate one another. Anyway, so this chestnut went in, and early on I just put this simple chestnut in the middle of the yard, bop, and put some wood chips around it. In fact, I have a picture from early on where I designed a little mini guild that had kale and squash and different things like that when this was young. This tree got hammered by deer for the first year or two. I mean, like straight up hammered. Second year or third year, I noticed, so here's a great example of not so much designing the guild, but through observation allowing the guild to evolve. Birds were sitting on the beat up branches and must have been pooping out seeds for black-cap raspberries. Now I could very easily have gone in and said, oh, I didn't want black caps under here, they're spiky, it's going to make it hard to get to the nuts, etc., etc. But I just left it for a little while. The black caps thrive, the deer pressure on them is negligible, and what happened is the black caps used the branches of the chestnut as a little trellis, and they conferred onto the chestnut protection from deer because the black caps have spikiness. It allowed the chestnut to really rocket up into the canopy, and now it's, I wouldn't say immune to deer, but it's certainly of an age and size where I don't have to be concerned about deer pressure from now on. So black caps is an understory to the chestnut, informed and designed by birds and just not messed with by me. Sometimes it's as simple as just getting out of the way. What I've done with this guild is, like I do with a lot of my tree guilds, is I call it hedging my bets. I take my keystone tree and I plant near it in ways that would be compatible if they stayed for a long time, other trees that could either replace the tree or fill out the area. So here's a tiny little mulberry. This is to the west of the chestnut. It's being protected by a Turkish rocket. Turkish rocket seems to be, at this point, nearly 100% deer-proof. So it's in the shade there. It'll slowly work its way out, and it'll be a leaner. But I've seen mulberries lean before, and it works. It can take this whole space. To the north of the chestnut, I put in a Carpathian walnut, which just this year I think will enjoy also getting itself up into the canopy. And so this, again, because it's to the north, I'm making sure I'm keeping the chestnut as my key element, but I'm allowing another tree to squirt out to the north. I have a mulberry and a Nanking cherry on the southeast. All of these can be pruned or killed if needed, but for now they give me resiliency and a backup plan, and I believe they will be compatible in the long run with the chestnut. This is a tree that within my lifetime might get 60 to 80 feet tall, has the potential to get, I think, 150, some insane height, maybe 10 feet in diameter. So 4 to 6 generations from now, someone will have to figure out which one they want to keep. And they cut some other things. Let's look at the understory that's happening in here and see what that's all about. You know, it's funny, I haven't looked at this tree very closely this season. I was expecting to be able to really pick out a lot of key, interesting elements, but this is a good example of succession and what happens over a longer time horizon. So early on, this tree was very young, very small, and a lot of light was available underneath it. And so the kales, the squashes, the calendulas, all these different things really thrived. The black caps over time have really become the dominant ground cover, heavy duty herbaceous layer, small shrub layer, and it's actually simplifying in its complexity. And I'm still seeing some Artemisia family stuff in here. That was from early on. Still some clovers, but they're getting shaded as time goes on. And that's fine. It's going to be a simpler tree-based system in the long run. I no longer really need to have a rhizome barrier designed in because the blackcaps are just so strong in there. And so over time this will be simpler and simpler. If we stopped mowing, I could imagine the blackcaps loping out and kind of creating thickets over time. If we really stopped mowing in here, the squirrels would almost certainly be collecting the nuts and planting them into the blackcaps, and so a chestnut thicket would form. But for now, there's mowing. All of these clippings, by the way, I use a pull behind lawn sweep, and I can accumulate, this is a side note, but I can accumulate all the mowed clipping, and so in exchange for getting a nice tidy lawn, we get mountains of greens that I can compost. So it actually obtains a yield. It's kind of like making micro hay. That's just a side note. So here's a chestnut guild, half designed by me, half designed by wildlife, all really thriving, and with a number of trees that can hedge their bets. So thanks for watching. The next one I do will be a little bit more complex. I'm going to get into the Grandma Cherry Guild, replete with persimmons and northern hardy pecans, shagbark hickory, grapes, Siberian peaches, apricots, black currants, lemon balms, and probably 20 more things. We'll talk about that next. Thanks for watching. I hope you subscribe if you haven't yet.